Hi dear students, welcome back to another video. In this video, we are going to discuss the short story Beloved Boles by Maxim Gorky, which is prescribed in the SCRT 10th standard textbook. We have already completed discussing all the three lessons from the fourth unit. So this is the first lesson from your fifth unit, titled Songs of the Self. So before we proceed with the detailed analysis of the story, let's start with the unit. Let's analyze the themes of the unit, which will help you understand the lessons in this unit better and also to attempt the questions based on the lessons given in this unit with a greater confidence. So, as I said, the title of the unit is Songs of the Self, which is an allusion to a famous poem by Walt Whitman titled Song of Myself. There are three lessons in this unit. Beloved Boles, which is a short story by Maxim Gorky. Preference National, which is an autobiographical story by Fattodio. Mirror, a poem by Sylvia Plath. Before we proceed with the detailed analysis of Beloved Boles by Maxim Gorky, let's talk about the themes explored in this unit. The first theme is the question of identity. So, identity is what a person is. It can be how we see ourselves, how others see us, and how others refuse to see us. What do we think of ourselves? What are our strengths? What are our weaknesses? All this forms a part of our self-perception. Our self-perception is highly influenced by the social perception, which means how others see us or how they refuse to see us. A person who is socially accepted, who is well taken care of by the family and the people around him, might have a better self-perception compared to a person who finds it difficult to fit in the socially accepted standards. For example, a migrant, a refugee, a person from a minority community who is facing discrimination, a person who is marginalized. So in their case, their self-perception and the social perception will be constantly in conflict. And this conflict will lead to psychological issues. So the first idea discussed by this unit is identity. Then search for identity. See, our concept of identity is constantly being influenced by acceptance and rejection that we face from the society, which influences our level of pride or our idea of shame about our identity. Then a sense of belongingness and loneliness. A person who feels a sense of belongingness with their classroom will have a better self-perception. A person who thinks, okay, I don't have good friends in this classroom, might feel lonely in the classroom. It might influence their confidence and also their self-perception. Based on this example, you might be able to imagine how grave the situation is based on the level of discrimination a person might face in a given society. Moving on from identity, search for identity. We have the ideas of loneliness and isolation. See, in a given society, a person might be isolated because of various reasons. The color of their skin, the community from which they come from, their gender, their sexual orientation. All this can be a reason for facing isolation. So, a person who is marginalized from the mainstream society might undergo various mental issues. It can lead to a deep psychological trauma to them. It might lead to psychological problems like imagined identity, where we accept a self which is entirely different from who we really are. This underscores the human need for connection. As we all know, human beings are considered to be social animals. We thrive with social relations. So, Facing isolation from society, people might undergo different mental issues. So, we have identity, search for identity, loneliness and isolation, then there is racial prejudice. If you take a look at the autobiographical write-up Preference National by Fathodio, you see how a person is being judged based on their racial identity. So it talks about the harsh reality of racial and cultural identity. So as you go through this unit, please keep this thought in your mind. Then self image and aging. So, coming to the poem Mirror by Sylvia Plath, we have a woman who is not ready to accept that she is in fact getting aged. So, her self perception is in conflict with her own ideal perception about herself. Then, most important, having said about identity, search for identity, loneliness and isolation, racial prejudice, self image and aging, why do we learn this particular unit? This unit has been included in our text with the expectation that we develop empathy for understanding the struggles of marginalized sections of society. So, as you go through the text prescribed to us, please think about people who are marginalized because of various reasons, the struggle they have to undergo. So, we are supposed to be empathetic towards them. We have to have a greater sense of compassion for people who are being isolated from the mainstream society. Then, we are supposed to analyze social hierarchies, talk about what creates power dynamics, what creates rich and poor, who are those in power, and how do they come to power, and what do they do to people who are considerably powerless. Then, what is the reality of caste system in India? What about the condition of religious atrocities in India? So these are some of the questions that we have to ask ourselves after learning this unit. Then, how cultural prejudices influence personal relationships, self-perception and diaspora. So what is diaspora? Diaspora talks about people who are dispersed from their homeland. It includes migrants, immigrants who move from their own country to another place because of different reasons. So, person living in India has a sense of identity. Once he or she immigrates to some other country for job or for pursuing a higher degree, their sense of identity changes. The way people treat them in that particular country again influences their sense of identity. So that is diaspora. Then emotional and psychological dimensions of identity and self-worth. So how do the way society treats us influences our self-perception? How can we have a better self-perception? What are we supposed to do about having better self-worth? So having said about the themes of the unit, let's move on with the short story Beloved Boles. It is also known by the title Her Lover. It is a Russian short story written by the very famous writer Maxim Gorky. So before we talk about Beloved Boles, let's talk about Maxim Gorky as a writer. So he is a Russian writer. He was nominated for Nobel Prize for Literature 5 times. He ran away from home at the age of 12. He traveled across Russia, changing his jobs. This led to deep impressions which helped him with writing. He was associated with Marxist social democratic movement and he is considered as the founder of social realism in literature. So what is social realism? Social realism is encompassed by works produced by painters, writers, filmmakers, photographers and others that aim to draw attention to the real socio-political conditions of the working class. So it basically talks about how people in power treated the common people. The working class, who is to be considered as the backbone of an industrial society. The plight that they had, the social, political, economical problems they faced. So, social realism was a means of critique of the social and political setup that caused working class struggles. So, what are the major themes in socio-realistic fiction? Working class life and their struggles, social injustice and inequality, urban and industrial decay, marginalized voices. So, when you read Beloved Boles, think about how the story portrays these themes. Now, what are the major works by Maxim Gorky? Mother, which is a novel, The Lower Depths, which is a play, then his autobiographical trilogy, My Childhood, In the World, My Universities. These are his famous works, among others. What are the major themes discussed by Maxim Gorky through his writings? Dignity of human beings. See, if you are born a human being, irrespective of your class, caste, and creed, you should be treated with dignity and respect just because you are a human being. I think we should have a broader concept of dignity because any living being should have the right to live with dignity and die with dignity. Then, struggle against oppression and social injustice, protest against cruelty and ignorance, alienation and individualism. Any person who is considered to be different from the accepted notion of normal in a society will face alienation. So, how the alienated people fight against it was a common theme of literature from 20th century. So, having said all this, let's move on to a detailed analysis of the short story Beloved Boles by Russian writer Maxim Gorky. It is also known by the title Her Lover. It follows the life of a socially isolated woman, Teresa, a woman with a questionable reputation, maybe on the account that she followed prostitution for a living. So she is a Polish migrant in Moscow, the capital of Russia. So the character Teresa is presented to us from the perspective of the other character, who is an unnamed character who is referred to as the student. So the story of Teresa was narrated to our writer Maxim Gorky by Mr. Student, who was a close acquaintance of Maxim Gorky. So how did they know each other, Teresa and Mr. Student? Mr. Student, as his name suggests, was a student in the city of Moscow. He lived in an apartment and Teresa lived in the opposite apartment. So we can say that they were neighbors. So we get to know about Teresa from the perspective of student. So his initial impression is about her physical appearance. So he says that she was tall, strong, she had bushy black eyebrows, she had dark brown hair and a large, coarse or rough face. So all these attributes are considered less feminine. Okay, so we can say that she was a masculine woman. So the narrator's first impression, as he suggests, is that the gleam in her eyes, her tough bass voice, the muscular vigor in her terrified him. So any woman who appears to be strong and masculine tends to intimidate men. So similarly, the student here is intimidated by Teresa's appearance and her way of carrying herself. So his initial description of Teresa makes us think that the student looked down upon her. So as we proceed in the story, we can understand this is in fact true. So, as she lived opposite to his room, she tried to smile at him and start a conversation with him. She, in fact, greeted him whenever she met him. So, these are hints that Teresa, in fact, wanted to start a conversation with the student, but the student always felt that, okay, she wants to talk to me just because she is drunk. And of course, the blurry eyes and the tousled hair just repelled him. So one day, out of blue, she comes to his room asking him a favor. She wanted to get a letter written. So it tells about an added disadvantage with Teresa. See, Teresa is already a Polish migrant in Moscow. She doesn't have a job. She resorts to prostitution to make a living. On top of all this, she is illiterate. She is not able to read and write. So she comes to student asking him a favor. She wants to get a letter written. So she says the letter is to be addressed to Boles Kashput, who lives in Warsaw Road. So as the student, even though reluctantly, he accepts her request and starts to write a letter to Boles Kashput, who is referred to as Boles by Teresa. So imagine Teresa is narrating the letter and the student takes it down. So as he starts writing, the student gets to know that she is making him write a love letter for Boles, in which Boles is referred to as my dear Boles, my beloved, my faithful lover. So the narrator, the student, found this extremely amusing. He in fact found it funny because a woman who is tall and strong with bushy eyebrows and coarse face calls herself a dove, a girl who is madly and deeply in love. So he asks her who Boles was. So she says, Boles is my young man. This makes Mr. Student almost cracks up. So she says, why can't a girl have a young man? So her self-perception, she considers herself to be a young girl madly in love with a young man named Boles. So she says, Mr. Student, that they have been together for past 6 years. So he wrote her love letter and she took the love letter and left to her room. After a week or two, Teresa comes back asking the student to write a letter addressing to Teresa. So this time, student got quite confused. He could see that her face was troubled and her fingers were trembling. But he was not ready to ask her what the problem was. He in fact judged her. He thought that she was trying to trick him to become her lover. So he literally scolded her. So this made her look terrified and distraught, and she looked as if she wanted to tell him something, but she couldn't. So even then, even though she looked troubled, even though she looked as if she wanted to tell him something, the student was not ready to ask her what her problem was. His first instinct was to scold her, was to judge her, was to criticize her for asking him to write a letter addressing to someone named Teresa. She leaves to her room, but this experience was really unpleasant for the narrator. This made him go to her room and have a conversation with her. So this is the first instinct in which he is taking an effort to start a conversation with Teresa. So till now, what we learned about Teresa is based on the judgment, the prejudice of Mr. Student. So now, finally, he has chosen to have a conversation with her, ask her what her problem is. So, after going to her room, his questions makes her have an emotional outburst. In that emotional outburst, she admits that there is no one named Boles. Boles was in fact an imaginary friend of hers. So she had literally invented a person named Boles to whom she addressed love letters. And she made people write letters by Boles addressed to herself so that she can read them and feel that she is being loved, she is being taken care of by someone out there. And she asked the student, am I not a human being like the rest of you? See, this is a question posed by the writer to the society. A person who's marginalized asked us this question, am I not a human being like the rest of you? Even though my lover is not there, I wanted him to be there. No harm was done to anyone by my writing to him. See, she invented an imaginary friend and asked others to write letters addressed to him and asked them to write letters from Boles addressed to herself. So, making others write letters, reading these letters and finding solace in them, never caused physical harm to others. So, what harm did it do to others? Literally nothing. So, she says, to quote words of Teresa, I write to him, and it looks as if he did exist. And Teresa, that's me. He replies to me, and then I write to him again. So, this is actually really painful, I must say. So, listening to these words of Teresa, the student felt miserable and ashamed of himself. This is what we, society, should feel. This must be a collective feeling. See, if any person out there is feeling isolated, if that person is feeling lonely, we must have a collective sense of shame in that, because we are not being a civilized society if we are isolating anyone, says the author. Okay. So then we have the student's realization, which is extremely important. Alongside of me, not 3 yards away, lived a human creature who had nobody in the world to treat her kindly, with no one to be affectionate to her. This human being invented a friend for herself. She used to make him write letters and make someone read it to her. She imagined it to be written by someone who loved her. See, we, as I said in the beginning, we are social animals. We thrive with people around us. We love, we like to be taken care of. So, here a human being, deprived of love, attention, and kindness, has literally invented an imaginary friend for herself, which shows that we as a society has failed. So, this makes a change in the student. The student's initial perception, initial impression about Teresa was extremely judgment. He judged her for being a prostitute. He judged her for her appearance. He judged her for being drunk. He never tried to understand her situation. He never tried to have a conversation with her. He never tried to help her out. But this particular incident, this revelation changed him. So, since then, twice a week, regularly, he began writing her letters. He also started reading out the letters to her, which she listened and she started weeping. So, in return of this, see, she never took anything for free, anything for granted. In return of this favor, she started mending the holes of his dresses. But after some time, he came to know that she was thrown into prison. And he thinks that she might be dead by the time he narrated this incident to the author. So after telling his experience with the author, the student adds something which is for us to ponder about, to have a deep thought on. The more the human creature has tasted of bitter things, the more it hungers for the sweet things in life. We, wrapped in the rags of our virtues, regard others through the mist of our self sufficiency. We people who have plenty of friends, who have plenty of means for entertainment, who are constantly connected with each other, tend to judge others who are deprived of these sweet things in life, says the student. And listening to the student, the author makes a final comment which is extremely important for us. This treatment, this condition of the isolated is as old as the hills. It is what it is, says the author. So it is his commentary on our social condition, how people are being marginalized because of their birth, the skin color of their skin, their caste, class, creed, occupation, gender, sexual orientation, and whatnot. So, the story is a critique of how the mainstream society marginalizes a section of its society and how quick we are to judge people who are from the marginalized sections of society. He expects us to change in the same way the student changed after learning the reality of Teresa. So we can say that the major themes of the story is sense of isolation, loneliness, social neglect, reality versus illusion, misjudgment. So your answers should have all these ideas. How are people being isolated? See here, Teresa is a Polish migrant in Moscow. That creates a sense of alienation in her. People isolate her because she is a migrant. She is not someone from Moscow. And she is said to have a questionable reputation since she is a prostitute. See, what creates prostitution? Women who do not have another means of livelihood are forced into this profession. We are quick to judge the prostitutes and we easily forget those who take her service. Then she is illiterate. So all are added disadvantages to Teresa. Mr. Student was quick to judge her. He was intimidated by her appearance, her voice, the fact that she used to drink. He had a problem with everything about her. But after learning a fact about her, that she was in fact deprived of love and care, she craved for human attention and kindness, compassion, and empathy, he changed, which shows that he was in fact a good person, just blinded by his prejudice. So, when you answer the questions, try to incorporate these points in your answers. Okay, I hope you enjoyed this discussion. Thank you. Bye.